We're good to go? Okay, we're going to go ahead and call our Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee to order. And we'll start off with a roll call. And we'll start, this time we'll reverse it. Duke Gurley. Tom Farrell.
Dave Bench.
Ryan Clinton.
Alex Robinette.
Jeff Marks.
And we have a quorum. First item we have is public comments, and there we, any of our citizens wishing to address the Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee for items not on the agenda can be received at this time. And do we have anybody that is showing up on our, I don't see any on the.
No one might appear.
Great.
We have a
Okay, consent agenda. We have one item, which is our discussion and possible action on the minutes from our April the 5th, 2023 CRCRC minutes. So let me make a suggestion on this. Anytime we go through this, if you haven't had a chance to read these, that's no big deal. If you want to go back at any time and make an amendment on some of our minutes, we can come back and do that. So, just so we don't hold everything up on that. So, if I could have a motion to accept the minutes as read, or as submitted.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
And we have a second.
Second.
And, or second. And I'll ask all those in favor. And we're not gonna do a roll call unless we have to on each one, and it's unanimous, and that is approved. Our regular agenda, we had discussed last time about doing some assignments to some subcommittees on this. And I would like to, before we get into this, I'm gonna change this around a little bit if everybody doesn't care. Since Dave has worked diligently already on getting a lot of information on the height part of this, I would like to go ahead, if our committee would agree, to allow Dave to, which would be item number 7, to present where he stands on the height limitation on that. And then we'll come back and pick up. I just want to show what work somebody has already done as a subcommittee.
Can we weigh in as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Just, and let me make sure everybody understands what my vision is, and we can discuss this, about the subcommittees. There'll be a group leading the subcommittee. That is not exclusive to any of us that want to be on that or have input in going into that particular item on it. The whole purpose of that is just strictly to hopefully streamline the process that we're going through. And that's the only reason I would suggest doing that. We're not trying to exclude anybody's input from going into it on that. Alex, is that
Yep, that's
covered?
great.
Okay. So if y'all don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and let Dave do this, and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay.
And I apologize, Ashley, for not telling you
Okay.
that.
Are the pictures in there somewhere that we had?
Yes, they're separate, yes.
Okay, can we bring those up real quick? My wife and I were out on our bicycles today taking pictures of stuff. So I thought that I'd like to share them with you.
All right. Dave, before you, I'm gonna give you a little bit of, our committee a little bit of information on our ordinances that we have on that.
You bet.
Start if you don't mind.
Uh-huh.
The ordinance that we have right now will evolve from basically 3 separate ordinances and amendments that we've done. The first one was on April 27th, 2000. And there we went from 30 feet to 35 feet. And we have a definition, and I'll I can pass these out. Just from a historical standpoint, we'll do that. In August of 2002, We kept the 35 feet, but we amended how the definition of building height that came about on that. And then the one that we're using today came about in July 2005. And again, it did not adjust the height, but it did adjust how we read. We started with ground zero, and we started with the definition of height that we use in our current ordinance. And Ashley, you want to, did you fill everybody in about the potential change that might occur tonight from a city council standpoint?
Sorry, pretty loud. So the actual number, the building height, 35 feet, none of that section is changing. The only thing under consideration tonight at the city council level is the definition of building height residential. It went to a public hearing at our last, it was a joint public hearing between the P&Z and city council. The P&Z actually recommended to not make any changes to that section. But the city council still has to have their discussion and take possible action on those ordinances, the amendment. And I think the only thing it does is provide some clarity to, what is that term? Surface, original native ground surface.
Ground zero.
And then does also change a small amount, one portion where it talks about within 5 feet of the building is where that measurement starts. That is also proposed currently in the language to come out. So that is what council will be discussing tonight.
Thank you. Sorry, Dave. I
No,
thought that would be helpful.
No, it is. We're going to go through a presentation that I had put together, but I thought I'd at least start it off by at least looking at a couple of houses, and then we can talk about what building height means, what the possibilities are. And it's not my intention to interject my own opinion about the best way to do things. All I'm trying to do is raise possibilities, what might be a way to go, and what people's concerns are based on what we're seeing with regard to emails and so on. Okay, so, like I said earlier, I was pedaling around and decided it might be useful to take some pictures of things that are going on, because more often than not, whenever we get into a P&Z meeting or a city council meeting, when people start talking about particular things with regard to the code, someone always comes up with, do you have a picture of that? Or what is the issue? Or what are we talking about? What is the thing right now? So I thought, well, why don't I just throw a couple of pictures up and at least we can look at it. Now, here's a house that is under construction right now. This is a fresh picture just taken today. And to the native eye, you might say, well, you know, that looks pretty high. That's a big house and all that. But I'd stand back and I'd look at that and I'd say, you know, I'll bet that's considerably less than 35 feet. I'll bet it is. You know, you can kind of count, you know, the different zip system sheets that are 8 foot tall. And you can look at it and you say, you know, I can probably add up and cut pretty close to what the height of that house is. I'll bet it's about 32 feet. Now, lots of people will look at that and say, no, it's more than 35. I know it. And we hear a lot of that. And the fact is that I think most people just plain don't know what it is. It just looks tall. That's what they know. Can we go to the next picture, or do I have that ability?
I actually was just inside the house that's behind that one, just before I came here,
Yeah.
talking to the owner. So,
Yeah, I didn't bring
that's
that
also
one.
a different perspective.
I didn't bring that picture with me.
Do you mind sharing what that feels like from the other side?
Well, I made the assumption myself that it was not at the max height, just from looking at it. Like you, I could say, I don't think that is, but it's definitely completely changed the landscape of their view. For one, all the trees were taken down, and something similar happened to us too. So when you originally buy your house or build or whatever, you are building with the existing context of tree canopy, and now that's gone. And there was a one-story house there, so now there's a two-story house. So it's impossible to build your privacy back in. You can't build a fence tall enough, you can't plant trees tall enough. So that's just the impact. So, but again, I don't think it's in violation of the rule.
Very good. Thanks for that. That was good input. All right, can we?
The arrow now might work.
The arrow might work. Okay. Okay, that one doesn't, that one doesn't. Okay, maybe it's up or down, it's, okay. All right, there's a house we all know and love.
Looks not so bad in the
If you-
picture.
huh?
It looks not so bad in the picture.
Well, how do you like that? Must be the photographer. What we have here is a house that has had a lot of discussion in the past. And, you know, as we see it get built, maybe it gets tamed by, you know, the outside sheathing. Maybe because we're getting the stucco on there now, maybe it's not looking as bad as what people thought. But regardless, it is a very large house, and it's not just what makes it, it's just not its size that makes it large. It's also where it sits on a hill, and also that it being kind of a tight street to begin with, you can't really distance yourself from this house that far. So it takes on a greater than large size feeling to it. It's got just, the feeling is overwhelming, and put on a different lot, it might not seem so. But where it is, it does. And people will complain about that, and they'll say, okay, well, this is higher, way higher than what the building, maximum building height allows, but probably not. Once again, you're looking straight up at this edifice, and it just seems like there's more house there than there really is.
Have we done an analysis of the square footage of the home relative to the lot size? Because I
No.
would bet that that's number one in the neighborhood.
This,
Oh, yeah.
It's 9,600 square feet.
It is something like that.
it is
yeah.
9,600. Now, you know, just for everybody who knows, I live next door.
Yeah.
You know, and they've been great. The builder's been very accommodating for us, so I'm not gonna say anything negative on that. The issue to me on this house is there is no area around the house. And part of that reason is that there is there's an, and I'm gonna use this, I'll mess this up. There is a drain that comes off of the back of this lot that drains all of a good portion of Ridgewood Drive. It comes there and it goes to the right-hand side of that house and goes down through us. There is no easement that the city of Austin has to dump that water onto this lot, but it does do that, which has been an issue for
Austin
quite a
is
while.
behind the house.
Austin, the city of
Ridgewood.
Austin is on that portion. In my lot, just put this in context. My lot, I have, behind me, I have city of Austin right here and Westlake Hills right here. We all come together right there. The house that's directly behind me, the line, the property line, or the city line goes through that house. And when the previous people had kids going to Eanes School District, the school district actually asked where their bedroom was in relationship to the house, which I thought was kind of silly.
Is that true?
That was true. All right, but they figured it out and got it done, so.
Did they sleep in?
I don't know where
AISD
they
or
left.
Which
So
was?
that was a big difference at the time, but, so the biggest problem I see on this is not so much the size of the house per se or the height. Although the height was an issue, the city got involved, they've done surveys, and the builder actually took 4 inches off the top and redid the roof line to take 4 inches off.
So does that mean that that house is at the absolute max then? If
It
it had
is
to
the
be brought
absolute
down
max.
4 inches?
Is it 45 or 35?
45.
45.
Well, I guess it depends on
It's
where
got
the,
graders.
because there's a
It's
slope.
got that drainage.
If you
Yeah.
measure the low
It's 40.
point here
Yes.
to the high point, and they're not in the exact same vertical, but they're pretty close, it's
Yeah.
45.
45 on the right
So
hand
it's,
side.
it's,
Yeah.
it's the house to lot ratio, I think, that causes that issue. And it's pushed fairly forward on that, to do. So, you know, it's maxed out,
Mhm.
which is nothing wrong with doing that as a builder, but that's what, when you do that, you have to absolutely make sure you don't go 4 inches over, or go around or do anything different on that. So, this is a spec house. So, you know, we're not sure how that's gonna work out. Most of them are, I mean, we got 6 houses in Park Hills. I don't know if it's us that's causing that, but there is a lot of them for sale around us now. But anyway, this is, I think that when we looked at originally, I think in 2000, I mentioned this last time, 2002, we looked at the impervious cover ratios of rolling wood, and I think we had 2 houses at that time that exceeded 30%. And I'm not sure what this one would be, because you do have that, he owns that creek area.
And I know Duke brought this up before about floor area ratio, I think. it was-
FAR.
Yeah. And that's my question is floor area ratio more palatable and effective than impervious cover? Because I know people are kind of opposed to the discussion around impervious cover. And would they ultimately yield about the same thing, or should we be talking about floor area ratio? Like, what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I say FAR is the way to try to regulate and control that. Because impervious coverage, I mean, to be honest with you, again, we have a drainage ordinance.
Yeah.
For anybody that says, oh God, we got drainage problems, yeah, we got drainage problems because we don't have any infrastructure to handle it. But there is a mechanism, there is a, you know, it's an attempt at controlling. I mean, I got 3 detention ponds, come look at them,
Yeah, impervious cover.
for
You just get more
22
tanks.
acres above me.
You just add more water tanks with impervious cover.
That's part of it, but that's not a total.
And
Can't
also,
get enough.
thinking about people's ability to be conscientious or creative with
Yeah.
their lots, and not trying to like maximize the resale potential, but to really develop their lot in a way that is, you know, thoughtful and gives them the flexibility to do nice things. I think that
Yeah, I mean, that's-
FAR enables that potentially.
So you're the neighbor next door, you can't say too much. I'll just say,
No.
that's ridiculous. You know, I mean,
Well-
it swallows that lot.
And if you look at it in the satellite view, I mean, there is not a scrap inside the buildable area that's not built.
It's, my question on this has been, and I'll be honest, this does not, I don't find, this doesn't bother me as much as it does some of my other neighbors, to be very honest. Cause I don't see, when I pull in the driveway on that, I have a house here, but the history of this lot is such that there's always been something there. So that, you know, remember I had a vacant house for about 20 years.
Yeah.
So with raccoons and God knows who, and you know, but, so it's, you know, it's just something new, but, it is built close, it is high, and it is a unique design, and it's massive on that street. So, but it meets code, and it does do that.
I have a comment and a question. One is that I think this is, from my anecdotal evidence of speaking with people in the neighborhood, that this is the primary house that seems to bother the largest number of people in
Really?
saying that this is too far. We don't know why. We can't put into words what it is about this necessarily, but this is too much and we don't want it, and we don't want it by us. And it's destructive of the character of the neighborhood. This seems to be the house that has raised the most alarms for, and if I said that wrong the first time, that's what I meant. This is the one that people are using as an example of, gosh, I don't want this next to me. We have to do something, even though it's hard to put into objective terms what it is about this that we have a problem with, other than, I mean, it's pretty easy to say, it seems like it's going corner to corner, and that's too much. It seems like the scale is too much, it seems like it's too close to the
Is it
street.
closer than 30 feet
I
to
don't
the
know, it
street?
certainly looks like it in that picture,
No.
but I don't know.
Wow, okay.
Are the cantilevers
Yeah.
exceeding the 30-foot setback?
The cantilever is over?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that's
Like
the
that,
case.
where you see the green zip board?
I mean,
So-
I think the 30-foot line's gonna be where the main walls hit the ground, and then there's projections beyond that.
But my question, and Duke, I hope that you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
Sure.
Do you mind sharing with me, as someone who doesn't know, exactly what how FAR works? I mean, do you look at both the first and the second story? Do you only look at the first story? What is it exactly?
Well, it would be a definition of what the buildable area is. Maybe it's habitable, okay? And that number is a percentage of the lot area.
Okay, so it's only the first floor
No,
that's
it'd be
measured,
for-
right?
It'd be for any level, multiple levels.
Does Austin have a floor area ratio?
Yeah, they do.
What is
I mean,
that, do you know?
It's
Put you on the
the
spot.
McMansion ordinance, you know? I know 45% is the impervious coverage. I can't remember what the FAR is. I've got it.
They have overlays
Sitting on a
in
shelf.
different areas too.
So, so how would how would an FAR, just throwing out a percentage if you don't mind, how would that affect
That
that?
9,600 might turn into 6,600, and that'd be the cap.
And it's total square footage of the home.
Could be.
The square footage, that needs to be defined as habitable, heated and cooled, you can come up with a
It's for
definition
us
and
to
kind of
work
figure
with
out where you
residents.
want that to hit.
Yep.
And maybe that is in our purview to do that, maybe,
And,
maybe.
and keep in mind, our history in Rolling Lake is we've used our setbacks,
Mhm.
our side setbacks and front and rear setbacks as a means to space our homes and as opposed to impervious cover,
So-
as opposed to FAR.
So the issue with that is there's 3 dimensions to the house, right? So if you define it with the setbacks, but then you have high height, you end up with a house that I think we're all saying the FAR is now too high, right? If we don't have an FAR in place, maybe that is really the extra layer that we would like to add to this conversation.
It could be on that. This was a very unique lot, although we have a lot of topography issues in Rosewood, so I wouldn't say, it may not be singular, but it is unique because of the fall that occurred.
I do want to say that, we have within our charter essentially a listing of things that we're supposed to be delivering on.
Right.
And I think that a floor to area ratio is a great idea and something that maybe just got missed. This was never meant to be an exhaustive list, but I think that I've heard from council members that if we decide we want to add something to it, we should ask to do that.
Sure.
I've had that discussion directly with Kevin.
Yeah,
so-
and what this discussion here is about is feeling our way around exactly what the size of our box is, And so if in fact it makes sense for us to consider a floor to area ratio in our code, then I would suggest that we ask council if we can add that to our list.
Yeah.
Or at least for consideration. What do you, I think we talked also about our dark sky ordinance possibly last week, and that's not here either. And I think dark sky is definitely something that is worth asking if we can consider as well.
I will make sure that happens.
Thank you.
I would say on that note that I think it's a mistake for us to go every time we have a discussion of some idea to then run to council and say, can we talk about that idea? I looked at this as not exhaustive, and that we were supposed to talk about residential stuff, figure out what the people care about, and try to come up with some solution. But I think that if there's a concern that we are limited to this list, I think that we should simply go to council and say, are we limited to this list? And if the answer to that is no, then we don't have to go piecemeal every time that we have an idea.
I also think we might want to prioritize this list so that we're not bouncing around between different topics, that we're focusing on the ones that are obviously important, height, setback, impervious cover, floor, whatever. We decide so that we can put all of our effort into that, and as we add things,
Yeah.
we then do it at once. We could say, okay, now we're ready to tackle this next group.
I would suspect that, as Ryan was saying, the council would say, look, whatever comes up, we're fine as long as it's in, that you can discuss, as we go through this. So, but we wanna make sure you at least discuss these items that we've included, but if you have something else, that's the way I read that to be anyway, to be very honest.
I'll bet we can get that to happen.
I would think so. But,
Okay.
So David.
Okay, all right, let's move on. I just wanted to point out one other thing about this house, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about it later, but one of the things that makes it feel so enormous is the fact that it's taken to the maximum height, but it's also got a flat roof. So it's not just a maximum height house, it's a maximum height house with a flat roof, which means that a box is defined literally as large as it can possibly be. So, and that creates another overwhelming sense of size. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on. You say, okay, well, there's only one like that, right? So, let's see, where am I?
Yeah.
There's one. A colleague of mine had brought this house to my attention earlier today and had mentioned that this house is similar in terms of size, and in fact it is a 4-story house, but for, I guess, maybe design considerations, it actually seems to play a little bit better. Having looked at it, I think it sits back on its lot a little bit further, and it does not overwhelm the neighborhood. There's more space involved here. The lot's larger and all that. It's just as large, I think, as the house that we were just looking at, but it doesn't overwhelm. So, large houses in Rowan Wood can work. And I'll just leave it at that.
And this one has, obviously, the ground plane comes up, and I think that from the front door, I can't really tell from this picture, but
That's
it
the
would
second
almost,
level.
what's that?
The front door is at the second level.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you say that the garage is the first level.
Yeah.
To me, the front door is sort of the first level, and then there's kind of a half
Basement.
basement.
Yeah.
So I would say
However you
that
wanna
that's
describe it.
a 2-story house from the street, but I can't really tell from this angle what that cupola on top looks like. But as a percentage of the overall, it's not fully a 3-story house, and it's not fully a 4-story house, because they've used the ground plane to mask the garage to some degree, and they do have a benefit of a nice.
And they've kind of stepped it back as well, too.
Yeah.
Well, look, the plate height on the garage is, I think is probably 8 feet,
Mhm.
which is a concession on his part to be a little more sensitive, and I bet the top floor is probably more of an attic-like space
Yeah.
versus being 9 or 10 foot plate height. Whereas the house on Park Hills is just maxed out. to-
Now, this is a cul-de-sac lot.
Yeah.
This is.
I mean, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
How
Yeah,
hard
it's
would it
only
be to
like-
calculate the FAR on these homes? Like, do we have the data? Do we have it all on a table for the city across all of the homes in terms of the square footage? And I feel like that's in our tax records, like
We do
T10
have
records, we
the-
might be able to do this
We could
quickly.
get the square footage
Yeah,
of a house.
And the area of the land, so.
Mhm.
Well, we know the area of the land.
Yeah.
We had, the one we had done, we had a, young lady who was getting an advanced degree over at UT, in urban planning, do that for us as part of her, thesis. I don't have a problem about asking them to do it again. I like to use UT.
And I wanna go back to Dave's point also about like the flat roof, cause in this instance, they're all flat roofs. But and I don't think it's a problem at the 3rd level, and even the 4th level appears to be a flat roof, but again, it's a very small percentage of the overall. So I wouldn't describe that as a fully 3-story house or even
Well,
4-story.
in a sense too, as you get further from the street, the roofs get further and further back.
They're stepped back. I
They
mean,
step back.
so look, the McMansion ordinance in
Yeah.
Austin,
Mhm.
you define a tent, and you have to fit in that tent. That tent cascades back.
Mhm.
So that's how they try to control.
Well, and that's just also being thoughtful design. They probably
Sure.
did that intentionally because they didn't want a big blocky house. You know?
I
So
agree.
they didn't need a rule to tell them, but
You also,
we do need some rules to tell some people.
you also have a lawn and a beautiful tree in the front yard, so it obstructs the view of the house a
Please
bit.
save the tree.
One of the nice things about this, I happen to know that they had done substantial cistern work on this house for regard to drainage, and that they harvest that water to manage their landscape, which I think is laudable. It's kind of a neat, organic kind of a feel in their yard. I like it. But that's just me. Let me, if
We're
I
all
can
moving.
go on.
Just had those 3.
Oh, okay, we could not put up the plan.
We did not put one with plans.
All right, what I had, I'll just talk about it, may I? I had intended for us to at least see a plan for a house that has not been approved, as far as I know, not been approved for permit, it hasn't been permitted. But it shares many of the attributes of the house that we looked at one before this. That is, it's very large, and it does overwhelm, or will overwhelm its lot if it is constructed as by plan. And I just want, and my only point in that is that what we saw here a second ago can happen again. As far as I know, there are no other plans out there that are being considered that take up that much space on a lot, that are that large. But there's still plenty of houses to knock down, so I think the work that we're doing here is important, and it will make a difference in the near term.
Where's
Okay.
the new one that you're speaking of?
I don't think I'm supposed to,
Oh, okay.
I'm not supposed to say.
We just requested
You
your
can-
addresses.
I can
and
share it with you
post
here.
addresses.
You can, yeah.
Is our main request.
Oh, there it is, Yeah, that's it. So
it's,
anyway,
I think,
it's almost fully 3 stories.
yeah.
yeah, that's gigantic. I think,
It captures the 35-foot plus the 10, plus a little fudging by my estimation.
I don't know what has happened with it. I did ask that little fudge in the corner be addressed, and I don't know whether it has or not. Is Nikki here? Do we know, Nikki?
Yeah, we can talk about it later.
Okay,
What is-
fine, okay, good.
We're not talking address specific right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good, all right, okay. So that's all I had with regard to pictures. I just wanted to kind of maybe illustrate the problem.
Let's go through our surrounding cities.
I
Okay.
have one comment before we move on to that, and that is just that it seems to me, having had many neighbors, including Jeff, build new houses on our street, I'm on Timberline, that it's fairly obvious when someone who already lives here is building a house, is designing a house compared to someone that it's just spec. Because it again, anecdotally, it certainly feels like the people who already live here are attempting, even though, you know, building large houses, are attempting to take into consideration the trees, the lawn, the feel, the neighbors. Not to put you on the spot, Jeff, but your house is a perfect example. It's quite beautiful. I'm sure I hope it's big enough for your family. I know you continue to expand your family. But it certainly does not overwhelm. It doesn't, it was mindful of
Very
all of
tasteful.
the things that would affect a neighbor. And so was the house built to your left, if you're facing your house. Frankly, so was the, I think, even larger house built across the street or cat a corner.
I would have guessed.
And so I think that it's quite possible to build within Rollingwood and have a big house, yet still be considerate of the scale and the neighbors and the impacts that these houses are having on others. And so I think our test is, how do we continue to allow people to build the homes that they want, but somehow have policies that reflect, I think, and again, we'll have a survey at some point, but I think a community desire to fit better within the neighborhood.
Could I continue with this, or did you want to bring
Please.
something
No,
else in?
no.
Okay,
Go
okay.
ahead.
All right, so, you should have this in your packet, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at it. With regard to residential building heights, I can promise you I've been up to my hips in it in the past 6 months. And frankly, I used to think whenever we first were encountering it, that this would be an easy thing to knock it right out, and we'll just, look at building heights and then fix it. It's way more nuanced. We get lots, as you've seen, lots of emails about it. They're on both sides of the problem, whether or not we change them, don't change them, whatever. And there's more than one component to building height. So taken together, we say, well, it might be, for this group, this may be the most difficult thing that we have facing us. This may be the hardest thing we got to get right? So, with regard to it, we have to decide something about what the datum is, where do we take our measurements from? What that actual numeric measurement is, today is 35 feet, is that the right number? I don't know. And what the approach is to making that measurement. All those things are the components that go into building height and into our code. And they're frankly not necessarily codependent. There is some codependence in them, but some of them will kind of work independent of one another, and we'll talk about that. Now, in my email that I sent to Desiree and she passed along to you, I asked if you could look at these considerations, and just for your own sake, just kind of get your head clear around it. What do you think are the most important considerations with regard to this building height issue? And I wrote down my own, and these aren't in any particular order. I just put them, these things that I think that are we're seeing in our emails, and some of them, whenever I see an email, I say, well, that's not very important. But it is to that person. But I know what's important to me, and I know that of these, there's 3 categories here. There's the aesthetic thing, and we've been talking a lot about aesthetics in the past 10 minutes. There's the financial thing, which we've been talking a lot less, but it certainly does weigh in. Let's face it, it's a big deal. And then there's the geography, which is a unique consideration here for Rollingwood because our geography is complex. So, within the aesthetics, we've got the neighborhood fit, and to me, that's a number one thing. I think that whenever we hear about people's concern about what's being built next door, it's about it not fitting next door. It being something that is not appropriate to the space that is going to occupy. Then the next thing we hear about is privacy. That this thing that is being built next to me looks into my windows. And we see a lot of the emails, and I think a lot of those things are coming from people who've lived here the longest. And then there are views. We heard at the last, whenever we had the joint public hearing, Mrs. Wilson, what's her name? Ellen Wilson, got up and said that they've lived here a long time, and when they bought their lot, that they actually paid extra because they had a view. I thought, well, that's interesting. And she's afraid that that's in jeopardy now. That she's going to lose what she paid extra for. Then there are property rights, whatever that means. I think that a lot of people say that, if I am not allowed to do a particular thing, then you are, you're
losing their entitlements, which is
Yeah.
a word that is cropping up. That
Well, entitlements is the next thing, and that's in my
Is that
financial
right?
side.
Yes, loss of entitlement.
Yeah, we can talk about that. But anyway, that people feel like, that they're being oppressed. That there's, if I tell you you can't do this particular thing, or that I'm squeezing you down, that there's some oppression aspect of it, and it will affect my aesthetics as well. Okay. Now, if we go to the financial side, there is this opportunity loss. We've heard there are some people in emails that are saying, well, wait a minute, you built a new house, you knocked one down, and you're going to change the rules now? If I knock my house down, I'm not going to be able to build as big a house as you built. Even though it's not necessarily true, that's what people were saying. And it's in the emails. It's an interesting thing. And then there's this so-called loss of entitlements. And I only learned about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago what entitlement actually means. And it means that whatever is there, whatever is there is gone. That if you have an ordinance that permits a certain size, and you change that ordinance, and that ordinance is a reduction in that size, then you've just lost an entitlement. Or if you have things that go into the setbacks allowed, and now all of a sudden you're not allowed to put that thing in the setback anymore, you have lost an entitlement. So it's literally virtually anything that changes that makes it maybe less. Okay? And then there's the building cost per square foot. That's certainly a thing that is, driving a lot of these houses to be as high as they are today, and putting a flat roof on them. Flat roof means more size. More size means more square footage. Building cost per square foot right now is high, but as I build a house larger, there's economics in it. There's economy in size. So if I build the biggest house I can possibly do it, I'm also building it as cheaply as I can do it. So, and my return will be the best. And then there's the nonconformance issue, and we read about that all the time in our various newsletters that are going out. That if, in fact, we change the rules, then that will create nonconformance. And nonconformance, by definition, means that we lose property value, which isn't true, but people say it. They say it. So anyway, these are the things that are in front of us here. Then, of course, we have the geography, and we've got everything from flat to hilly. And the question does come up, does one size fit all? Whatever we come up with here with regard to building height, is it going to be able to meet the requirement of our geography, which is sometimes pretty tough? Okay, so I just want to clear the air. These are the things I've been thinking about, things I've been reading about, and the things that I think that we have to consider whenever we're doing whatever it is we're doing. Now, if we go to the next, let's see. This is the building height definition as it is today. And I want to call attention to a couple of things here. You've read this. But one of the interesting things about our definition of building height is whenever you say, the reference datum shall be selected by either of the following, comma, whichever yields the greater height of the building. This ordinance, or this definition, if you look around virtually anywhere, at any other city, it's almost always the lesser, not the greater. It's a funny thing. I mean, ours is the only ordinance that I haven't looked at everything, but it's just like the ordinance is written to tempt you to drive it up. It's like it's just kind of, it's okay. Go ahead, build it. Get it up there.
I would like to ask a clarification at this point.
Yeah.
Regarding the slope calculation. So this is from the exterior building, but my understanding is sometimes people are using the overall site, your entire site, to measure that might have happened on a house? Or is it just
Footprint.
the building setback, or is it just the footprint?
My understanding, it's a footprint.
Okay.
Footprint
But
plus
are they-
5.
But is that clear, and is that what's being enforced?
The way it's being applied, when you see within a 5-foot horizontal distance of the exterior wall of the
Okay.
building.
Okay,
So the builder can use that extra 5 feet,
Right.
even though it's not sitting under the footprint of the building, to get to the 10 feet.
in one of the emails, and maybe this was rumor, and that's why I'm asking this question, it said that the home on Riley, two away from
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
used the entire site to calculate slope, but that would, don't know, okay.
I would
Did
have.
y'all read that as well?
I saw the email.
Yeah, okay.
My understanding of the way this is done, and Nikki, correct me, our building development officer, is that it's done based on a survey, actually maybe even before the building plan is presented to the city.
Okay.
So reference datum is selected based just on that survey. What's the change in elevation from that survey, and where the, I don't know that it's been done across the full site, but you really can't, once you get to the building application phase, you really can't, you can see where they've marked the datum,
Right.
but you don't have the underlying survey to actually know. I do know that on, I think it's 603 Riley, both the low point and the high point are outside the perimeter of the building
The
footprint.
5-foot buffer?
They are within 5 feet of it as marked on the plan, or marked on the building plan. The reference datum are shown on the building plan, and they're shown to be within 5 feet of the building. But that's my understanding of how it's applied today.
That sounds probably right, and I think that rumor was probably,
Brooke, why would you say they don't have a basis for, I mean, if you have to turn in an existing, original, as-built survey prior to construction, you've got a datum, you've got a point, and it should be identifiable and you live by it.
Well, it is shown. We're not verifying it. And when I've seen the survey doesn't necessarily have the building footprint on it. It's
No.
yeah.
Yeah, but there's a point where that's transposed
Okay.
and the building footprint should be on the topographic
yes.
survey.
like, that should be a requirement that we are, I think,
Oh, yeah.
now doing for sure, but maybe didn't.
Not yet.
I mean, I think the site plan says
Not
it's
yet.
gotta have, demonstration of what the existing and finished grades are.
They're shown, yes, but they're
I mean,
It's-
one point of clarity might be
What I
that
was
we have
trying-
to require somebody to go and say, okay, there's the spot elevation that you're gonna use, and they have to go and survey it.
Yeah.
what I was trying to say is when if you're looking at the paper file, you can't tell from the paper file what the underlying survey is. It's just a difficulty in the looking at it from a paper file standpoint. I'm not saying it's can't be
Okay.
found or that surveys aren't being done, but we are hoping to include a requirement that we have an independent survey at the beginning and at the end, and get that verified.
Can I ask a question, Councilmember Brown? As I understood, you mentioned that right now, or at least historically, the change in elevation has been reported in the survey or determined in the survey, but that at that point we don't necessarily have the footprint of the building, which is where we believe that the datum the change in slope should be determined from. Is that right?
Well, that is a judgment call, I would say. You know, if you're adjusting the allowance in building height for the slope of the property, then do you do that just based on where the building's going to sit, or do you take in a wider area? I haven't heard a good justification for taking in an area 5 feet beyond the perimeter of the building for that purpose. And so,
But doesn't this say the reference point is the highest point of the building height?
it's the highest point above within a 5-foot horizontal distance of the
Right.
exterior wall.
Agreed,
Yeah.
but my point is, let's say the survey is measuring a 12-foot distance between the highest point and lowest point on the lot. We don't have the building height at that point, or we don't have the building footprint at that point. But let's say we find out later that the building footprint only has a 8-foot change in elevation. Which two of those is applying to that house, the 12-foot or the 8-foot?
It should be the original survey,
Yeah.
should it?
Well, so I think I've pointed out the problem, a
Yeah.
problem, which is that, at least as I read it, it's supposed to be determined by the building, but we're instead measuring it by the lot. Is that, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Well, I don't
It's
understand
measured
why
by the
we're
survey.
measuring it by the lot when it says exterior wall.
That's how I read it too. And before I stop, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to point out, because I am a lawyer and I litigate statutes and contracts. That's what I do. And the way I read this is that clause, whichever yields a greater height of the building, has no effect, because
Correct.
subsection 1 applies when
Less than 10.
such original native ground is less than 10, and section 2 applies when such original native ground is more than 10. So even though, yes, it does say that greater height, it has no effect, those words.
Other than to establish tone.
Well, maybe. So I'm a lawyer. I don't believe in tone. I probably don't have a very good tone either.
You're right.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is that as far as I could tell in my search, which is not nearly as extensive as yours, that the framing of this generally came from the model residential code at the time, which no longer exists. It's been rolled into the International Building Code, or at least those two organizations have combined and only issue one. I don't know what the International Building Code says. I couldn't find that. It was paywalled when I looked for it, and I wasn't willing to pay for it myself. But at least it was model language, roughly model language. There was some changes made to the model language, but it was model language at the time it was passed.
Yeah.
I would also, I think that for me, keeping the 35-foot number is important just for the community, but I think that it might be worth just a conversation about what if we changed the 10-foot either grade change and or bonus number, like just for sake of conversation. What if we said you couldn't add 10 bonus feet, you could add 8, or that the grade change is more like 12 or 15 feet? I don't know. Is that worth?
Well, you could actually turn it around and say, instead of it being 10 feet higher than lowest grade, you could actually measure from the lowest grade instead of the highest grade, which is, I think, what the intention was whenever they wrote this. It's not to say that it was going to be the lowest grade, but rather the higher of the two things. Even though it doesn't really make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not really what it says, but I think that was their intention.
I would say that we should put a giant X in this
Oh, yeah.
this
Yeah,
provision and start all over.
Yeah.
That'd be my personal preference.
there you go.
But I also want to mention that there are lots like mine
Yeah.
where, as far as I can tell, if looking at topographical maps, that there's a greater than 40-foot drop between the top and the top of mine and the bottom. And when you look at it, it actually looks like significantly more than 40 feet, but from the maps it appears to be about 40. And
Your email caused me to go look at your place.
yeah, it's
And
pretty
I get it.
shocking.
Wow.
Is that across the lot?
What's that?
Is that across the lot? Across the footprint,
Yes,
front
if you
to
took the
back?
highest point on the front yard and the lowest point in the backyard, yeah, I think it may even be more than 40.
38 feet
Yeah.
on the last house.
It's amazing.
Within the buildable, well, it depends on what you define as buildable, because my house goes down the lot goes down a cliff, and so depending on what you count, I don't know what someone would do, but just the reason I say let's strike this and start all over is just something like this would almost require me to have or something, and some of the things that have been floated that are it can only be 35 feet from any ground level would create a situation where I could only build a one-story house.
Yeah, what's the minimum number of
But
stories or feet
would
that we
it?
wanna
Yeah.
allow
Why
everyone
On the
to
front
build?
yard, in
Yeah.
the front, it would only,
Yeah.
I'd be, which is silly because everything else is 2 stories around and it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense that this one lot, because it has a big slope, would have to be one
Do
story.
we all agree everyone should be able to build a 2-story house?
Yes. Yeah,
'Cause
but
some
I
things
think that,
proposed wouldn't allow that, you know?
I think that, like, I don't know what your lot is, but I think that if you had, let's say it's as steep as you say,
And it goes back, so
So-
it falls back behind it.
It's
oh, it
literally a
starts high
drop
and
off.
goes
It's a cliff.
low.
It's a
Okay,
it's a
so-
cliff.
So here's the street, so
Yeah.
your house is somewhere up here.
That's right, so.
But
so-
I think that you could still build a, you know, you could have a
It-
2-story here.
There's
and then
no,
do
it's,
it-
it's not a slope, it's straight down.
Oh, it's a
Sheer.
cliff.
It's a
Yeah.
cliff,
On one part, on half of it, it's a
Yeah.
cliff,
It's
on
about
half of it, it's
60 degrees.
yeah.
it's
It's,
Okay.
massive.
it's pretty intense.
So if it's cantilevered, do you get to start over if it's not touching ground?
I think, you
Well,
know,
this
yeah.
points out
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
issue that we have in Rollingwood.
Doesn't it?
And Rollingwood's always tried to be a reasonably, fair to not only our existing neighbors, but to building, to make sure that they can build on a reasonable property, reasonable house on each of our properties. And I think that's probably why we have a Campbell, ordinance on this. I think that, I know that this is the 3 ordinances I gave you, and I think there were at least 2 other efforts before that to define how we got our height, in the city. So,
And it's been pointed out to me, I think someone on your commission pointed out to me when I spoke that it, you know, it could be that lots like mine just have to get a variance. You know, that there's no solution that works for a lot like mine, and maybe that's the point at which somebody has to go seek an exemption or variance. But it did point out to me at least the difficulty, at least one of the difficulties of trying a one-size-fits-all, which you mentioned on the last slide, can it be possibly be the same for every lot? And also lots that slope up towards the back present much different issues than lots that slope down to the back. So the fact that this treats both of those 2 categories as the same
Yeah.
is, to me, a huge mistake because they present very different issues.
I went back and looked at your note, and you talked about in Nashville how they established the datum at effect, where a fire department can come in
That's
through
right.
the front door.
Yeah.
Where would a fire department enter the home? And I'm thinking, why would you put that in your note? That would be the most worst thing that you could do to your house. Is establish that would be the a point where that would be the datum. There's so many houses that are built up like this, you know, that are 10 feet up off, and then we would be adding 10 feet to whatever the 35 is or whatever. I could not in my mind, I didn't include that in this package because I couldn't figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, and I, to be clear, I wasn't
Yeah.
suggesting that was the right solution.
No,
I was just
no.
suggesting that it was fascinating
It was a
that
possibility.
that a city that has grappled with this issue. And what I did was I looked up, and there are some places you can find it online of which cities have the highest average slope changes within the city. So, and that was in Nashville, Asheville, San Diego, interestingly, Los Angeles. I think there were several cities that fit in that. Some of them have, like Hawaii had like mountains and flat area. Well, that's not really the same because average, it throws off the averages.
Okay.
But there are some cities like Rollingwood where everything is, hilly. And so there's a average slope within the city, average slope change within the city. And I thought those were interesting for that reason. I assume, I didn't go back and look, but I looked for this. I didn't spend time to find the answer, but I assume that the fire code must define the place where the fire department enters, and that must have been a reference to a different code provision, is
Right.
what my guess was.
Brooke?
One other thing I just wanted that I've learned about this is that the elevation also, the means of determining the elevation is also varies. Its elevation is typically defined as so many feet above mean high tide or some kind of sea elevation. But depending upon which year of sea elevation you use, that can vary by several feet. So for City of Austin, my understanding is that there is a defined definition for determining elevation. We don't have that here. So if we're going to start tying surveys to, or requiring that our surveyor confirm a survey at the time of the original plan and at the time of the occupancy permit, then we also need to define what elevation is to be used for that. We found that difference when we asked for the Park Hills and the Riley homes to be surveyed independently, and we got two different numbers. They were, our surveyor, the City of Rollingwood surveyor, was different 3 or 4 feet from the home builder surveyor on each of them, and different underlying surveyors were used by the home builders, and it's because of they were using different.
That's amazing.
Yes.
It would seem to me that the geologic survey should have
Mean high tide
Yeah, well,
varies.
yeah, there are different
that
markers
sea level
throughout
varies.
the country where the survey, the geologic survey, surveys in a point and establishes what the elevation at that point is. And that becomes the tide point for surveys.
If you define it,
Yeah.
matter
We
of,
can,
yeah.
if that's not happened, we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, y'all can undertake which one to use, or maybe there's a best one.
Every subdivision and every lot has been done in a different deal here.
Yeah, and it's a good point, but in the end, you've got a reference of topography lines.
Mhm.
And, you're gonna have a high point and a low point. What that differential is, that's what you're working to. I don't care if you start with, topography line 101 or 501. It's still gonna be 10 feet
Right.
difference or what.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Relative to the
And look, y'all,
corners, yeah.
just so you understand, if you're, Hal can tell you this, hey, if you're trying to design for a lot and you work to the setbacks and maybe you have tree configurations that make you wanna set back more and save these trees, yada, yada, yada. In the end, you're gonna play the game with looking at, okay, how many feet of fall do I have across this footprint? And if you're at 8 feet and you see, if I go 10 more feet, I'm still within the setback, I can get the 10. Well, guess what? You're gonna probably play that game
Yeah.
if you're looking to gain more square footage or something like that. But it's not like, okay, I go from building line to, I establish a footprint and go, okay, I'm done. You're gonna go back and forth and look at how you're gonna play with that footprint overall.
Let's,
We've got to move, yeah.
yeah, let's move on.
So, anyway, I only brought this up because I wanted to at least show where we are today. As was discussed earlier, Ashley said, City Council is going to consider whether they want to change this to bring the 5 feet back into the perimeter of the house. We don't know whether or not that'll get passed or not, but I'll be there to watch. And then this next piece is the maximum permissible height, 107-71. Roy, what it says is that the maximum height that we permit is 35 feet. And then an additional 3 feet for chimneys and vents and things of that nature over top of that 35, and that's it. This isn't really controversial, it's just the number of feet that we use. I wonder if it's worth, now that we've talked about these things here, what the individual's feelings about the importance of any of these things are. Is it worth talking about that before we go further?
What I wanted to do
Okay.
with this is just kind of illustrate what our committees are gonna be doing
Okay,
on that. So, we're gonna be putting somebody else, we're gonna be forming committees that will come
Okay.
back and do most,
okay.
a little more detail on that.
I don't know what's going on there. Why is that there? There's something, thank you.
Magic touch.
Okay, so, starting with datum, the considerations here are a single point datum, which is what we have today. We survey and a point, we decide whether or not we're gonna go up 35 feet from there and or 45 feet from somewhere 10 foot below it. Or, and there are, by way of different kinds of calculations, you might have a perimeter datum, which would be effectively a contour. Okay? So, and the thing about, in our current code, if we decide to go ahead with a single point datum, it's in our current code, it's easy. That's the pros. The cons of it are it allows for 45-foot walls to exist. And then it also kind of calls into this tone, whichever is greater. And two, finally, it does not allow for slope averaging. So, you know, we can, if we use a perimeter, we can take a variety of points around the perimeter of a place and we can take averages of that and use that as our starting point for a maximum height. Single point won't allow that because we're only using one point. So, with regard to height, I only threw 2 up here because only 2 have been being discussed by the public. Some people are saying maybe we ought to go back to the 30-foot height that we used to have many years ago. I personally think that it's more reasonable with the hilly terrain. It does work with various roof pitches, can soften the effect of flat roofs because it's not 35 feet, it's only 30. The cons of this are some people consider it to be too similar to whatever Westlake Hills is doing. And people are offended by that. I don't know why, but they are. And then if we change it, it creates this nonconformance, which
Do we
some
wanna
people-
talk about that at all, or?
Good, yeah,
Okay.
please do.
Because I agree with you. I mean, as personally, I think my house, from the lowest point to the absolute highest point, is 28.5 feet, and it's plenty of house, you know. And I, you know, and it's not exactly flat, but I do think that it can be accomplished. But my concern is the reaction of the neighborhood, and so trying to find a way to appease people by changing the least amount with the greatest effect is sort of why I'm suggesting sticking with the 35 feet, even though,
that's
I
where
think-
we're going to go. We're going to go there with the pitched roof idea.
yeah,
Okay?
yeah,
That's where we're going to go.
okay.
Okay?
One thing that keeps coming to me is the FAR. If you introduce that,
Yeah.
it's going to accomplish some of these goals because it's going to incentivize the pitched roof. Because you're going to have less house that you're going to be calculated in the numerator of that ratio.
Mhm.
Without necessarily changing the building height?
Correct.
Yeah.
You think so, huh? Okay.
Because it's less space, right?
Right,
if
right,
it's
right.
pitched, then you have less room up there, but you could still have achieve the same height.
Well, I don't
Okay.
know that it's measuring volume, it's just measuring the footprint, right?
Well, that was my question earlier. I think it
I didn't understand that part.
Okay.
It's just, again, FAR is gonna be determined, you gotta define what the floor area is. And is that HVAC, heated and cooled? Is it total gross square footage? And then determine what the percentage of the lot
does that
area.
include the top floor?
Would it include, if there is a top floor design? Yes.
Yes.
So-
Okay.
but-
So it does
Multiple
include
floors.
that.
I think that we're still talking
Well-
past each other a little bit.
Okay.
But that's a
Does
habitable area.
Does FAR accomplish the tent that you were describing, or does FAR only look at the footprint of the house?
It only looks at the footprint.
Yeah.
So you know,
It's
you're either gonna
habitable
have
area, but it doesn't matter
uh,
if
I
it's
see.
like pitched or.
a house that sort of respects a tent and sort of steps back, or you're gonna have a very small footprint that's really tall, that maxes out that square footage.
So is it adding the square footage of both stories? Is that, maybe this is a better way, what is the formula for calculating FAR? That's a better, maybe that's a
Okay, if
better
you've
way
got
of questioning it.
If the FAR is, you know, 25%, and your lot area is 20,000 square feet, then you can have a 5,000 square foot allowable. Now, again, is that heated and cooled? Is that gross?
This is what it says on the City of Austin website. FAR is the ratio of total building floor area in relation to the area of its zoning lot. Meaning, somebody mentioned, different zones have different floor area ratios, but
This is not value.
it's just, if you look on a piece of paper and it says your house is, 2,500 square feet, it's that number. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter where you put it on the lot.
If it's in the attic, if it's,
We
it's.
want something different, which
it's-
is volume. We wanna capture the volume
Yeah,
of that
that is
top
something
story.
different.
Yep, we want something different here, I think.
And so it doesn't do the tent, and I do wonder if Austin has something that also adds the tent as a layer on top of it.
They,
Well,
they do,
The tent basically controls building height, because nothing can project out of the tent. And there's a few exceptions like dormers and things like that, but everything in that building needs to fit within the tent from a height standpoint.
And how's the tent defined?
The tent is defined by setbacks and grade changes, and as you go, let's say if you have a deep lot, let's say,
No.
then you got the first, I can't remember the number, first 50 feet is a bigger space, the next 50 feet, it's lower, it steps down.
Wow.
Now, and it all is respective of topography as well. But then on the sides, it goes up 15 feet and then it starts sloping. So you got a setback from your neighbor at a certain point.
It sounds like whatever it is, it's completely different from what we're doing today.
Oh, yeah.
Completely different. It's a whole different approach.
Think
So,
of a
What
title.
we're talking about making changes to the way it's defined today, right? As opposed to taking the entire approach and converting it to something else completely.
well, there, you're dealing with a massive amount of staff to look at and check this. And the process to go through is horrendous, and the cost is, you just multiply your costs.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of ways you can get there for our situation, that we could use a FAR with setbacks and height that does get you, I think, covers you within that,
It's not even FAR, it's volume. It's
It's
volume to
volume.
lot ratio is what I think we're most offended by. So the Park Hills home figured out the maximum possible size of volume you could build on that lot, right? And then we're pointing to height, but it's a couple of things, because it's the height plus no pitched roof, plus maximizing the setbacks, plus maximizing every possible inch possible in that home.
Yeah.
If you had, and I agree that we have to be mindful of being able to enforce whatever, it has to be, I do not believe that we should start with what we have. I think we should start with what it is the community wants, and then attempt to come up with a solution that would provide the community what it wants in a way that the staff can enforce. But that's just my bias is I don't care the way things have always been done. Like it doesn't like push
This thing's been
move the needle
changed.
for me at all. Like this is what we have now. I think
There's nothing magic about this, because, I was there when 2 of them were done. Not the last one, but 2 before that, and I promise you, all of us, it was 100% compromise of where we were going on it, and
I think I built under all 3 of them.
and, well, remember, there were 2 more before this, though, that I know of. And it was just, there's nothing magic about it, Brian. I agree. I think we're smarter to say, let's look at what we want as a community and then how we get there.
And I think you have to start with the edge cases, because there's some sloped lots where if you take some of what's being proposed, literally will have that person who has a blank sloped lot not be able to put a 2-story home up.
And I think you can put in there that you can allow those exceptions. There's nothing wrong, I mean, our ordinance is fairly simple, but you can add an exception in there if the slope lots prohibits.
Because I've heard it, like, maybe, they'll just go to BOA for a variance. I don't like legislating that into the code, right? We should try to cover it up front if possible.
You know, just because you have the right to go to the Board of Adjustment doesn't mean you get it.
That's right.
So, and that's, you know, I agree. I think you have to put that in there to do that.
So, I don't know whether we're trying to go in a different direction from considering building height, or are we going to keep on going, march through a building height decision or a set of ordinances?
What I would like to do, David, is to say, okay, you've done a lot of work on this.
Sure.
Which is great. And I think that, I think we need to just procedurally, and then everybody jump in. I think one of the things that we should do is, just like Ryan was saying, is make sure that we get our citizens' input on what they want first. I mean, we can try to get there from that standpoint. But I think that I would like to at least start by, tonight I have we have one item is to assign each of us on some of these subcommittees.
Sure.
So that we can at least start getting the information to provide to our citizens when we have a public hearing
Right.
on this. So,
But you say that, and that's great, but if in fact, some of these items here are fairly specific,
they are.
and if we're thinking about changing the approach, or that we're going to get citizen input before we decide how we move forward, aren't we putting the cart before the horse by assigning, having people work on committees for specific things that may or may not be part of what we deliver?
Here's what happens when we have, my experience is, when we have on here to set up our first public hearing. When people come in and they have a question about the height, just like we all have had here, and we all have dealt with this for a lot of things, a lot of our citizens haven't. So having our ability to answer some of their questions on that when they come in, they may think they want X, Y, Z,
Okay.
but and once they figure out that, just like we've gone through this process of the FAR, and we might figure that maybe we don't want the FAR because of the limitations that it imposes.
Well, then let me say it a different way. Then what we might be doing here is building some straw man. Something that you can put it up there and sit it up, and you can have people talk about it or poke at it or decide whether they like that or not, or that it meets what the public requirement might be or not. But it just becomes a starting point, effectively just something out there that you're looking at and you're saying, well, I like it, but it's green and I really want it to be blue.
Well, I think that my feeling is that the first public hearing we have needs to be very quickly.
Okay.
Just to give multiple opportunities for people to come in and give their input. So, but having some defined areas that we're looking at.
Do you
on
expect to
this.
get additional feedback beyond, because we've been soliciting emails for a while, everyone's been emailing. Do you expect to get incremental input beyond what we've seen so far?
I hope to, if we get people, actually, if we have a public hearing and it's advertised, and it takes about 2 weeks, if you do it, if you advertise more than 2 weeks, people forget, I forget. I may not show up if it's more than 2 weeks. So if we do that and we have the public come here and speak to us, and it be the people that that have an issue, then we get some input from our citizens that didn't send an email, that will just give us verbal input on that.
I want to mention that I read through all the emails, and when I was on planning and zoning and there were issues that came up, I actually personally reached out to people individually, and I felt like as a representative for their feelings about things, I really wanted to understand it, because I really believe, I think we have to walk this line between everything that we're hearing, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned about throwing things out, even though I agree with you. I think it could be written better. I'm worried about the perception that that's going to be upsetting to people, and a lot of people are still operating under the very first, words that came out about this, and there was a knee-jerk reaction to some stuff, a sense that their rights are going to be taken away or whatever. And having personally talked to people now, even people that were frankly against any changes, there's a lot of nuance to their opinion about it, and it's not that they're just outright against it. They actually, if they felt like their ability to do what they want was taken away, but what they wanted to do was actually really thoughtful. They wanted to build something nice, and they don't want to be told that there's certain restrictions that keep them from what would end up being something that's really special. And so I think that's the concern. It's like, well, don't do anything if you're going to take away my opportunity to do something nice. At the same time, they disagree with the Park Hills house. They're like, I don't want that. What can we do to stop that? And I actually think that, we don't want a 45-foot tall facade, but I can actually think of an example of a house that's going up now. By my best estimation, I think it's 45 feet. It looks like it's 4 stories. Sorry, am I taking up too much time? I'll stop there. But I just want to say that I think that there's nuance, and I think that if we give people a chance to listen and talk about it and understand that it's not just we're taking away everybody's rights that we're trying to find.
Yeah, I'm add this. Remember, Rollingwood was formed on the basis of rebelling against regulation from the city of Austin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a enduring history of not wanting our rights and entitlements taken
But
away
there's
for
still
whatever that is.
not homogeneity, not uniformity, but there is a consistency to the look of Rollingwood that's kind of being ripped apart in places. And I think, first of all, we are a community. We've moved here because it has a certain feel. But then you start talking to individuals that are like, well, yeah, but I want to be able to do this and not, and then it's kind of ripping apart the fabric. So how do you?
Well, let me make a suggestion. As I sat here and listened to Dave, I think I would prefer that we don't do our subcommittees until after we have at least our first public hearing on that. If y'all would agree with that, I think that's what I would prefer to do. So just postpone, I'll just table item number 3, and we'll just do it after we do it.
I'm fine with either approach. I completely agree that we should not be, I would not support any proposal, even if I had written it right now, because I just don't think we should.
Yeah.
I think we need to reflect, we need to be a mirror before we do anything else. So the only thing that I would say limits that view a little bit, and it's what Jeff has brought up to me privately, is it feels like we still have a lot of learning to do as far as what is the current statute on these things, what is the current provision, what are the current restrictions on these things. And I think either subcommittee or some group of us, or even maybe a staff request, could be to try to at least build the database so that we know what the current rules are. Because to me, at least, I feel like I couldn't really even speak all that knowledgeably on a lot of these. You can certainly obviously speak extremely knowledgeably on many of them, but I'm not on P&Z and I'm not privy to all of the, input and all the thought that you've put into it. So that's where I am. The subcommittees at some point could collect information if that's the way that we need to collect
So-
information.
Leading into that, as the item number 4, which says, which third parties do we want to ask to come and give us some information? Obviously, we have Nikki that's here every day, that we will be here. But we have the city attorneys, we have our building official, and we have our city engineer, and we have, a planner from, that we've used, that I was fairly, I probably did a good job, but anyway, let's, I'll just ask if anybody has any of these, or anybody else. If we want a history of, further about how we came about this, height deal, I was gonna invite Deeps.
Good.
Justice, and, cause Deeps was, very involved in it at the time, he was a council member at the time. So, if we have any of these, if we'd like to know, we can get them to come and give us a briefing on some of the information that we might need on that, as a group. Go ahead.
Prior to this discussion here, and I might have beat you to it, is that I had asked Nikki if I could spend a little bit of time with her just to get her input or her opinions or what her observations have been with regard to process and all this. And we just had that conversation, just right prior to this meeting, okay? So I took some notes down, which I found very useful. It was great, and to the extent that we can get input from others, I think you're right. Notwithstanding that there is also so much input that we've gotten from the public already. Have we all read all of the emails
We
cover to
have, but I
cover?
would almost call it outdated, because I feel like.
Do you think?
Yeah, to an extent, because
Yeah.
it was kind of the first round of stuff that was being talked about.
Well,
I'm not dismissing it, don't.
Am I missing something? Are we getting, I've not been getting like daily
It's in the
emails,
packet.
but is that
They're
the
in the
stuff that
package
you
today.
previously got to? I know, but is it stuff that you previously got as part of?
No,
I think
everything.
I misunderstood.
We have everything, right?
Yeah, but some you received from planning and zoning earlier this year, for the February meeting.
Okay, there are 36 emails, I think, that are in the package that you would put together that we had.
And are
given to
those
us.
like within the last week or two?
Those are from
that-
around the beginning of January.
January.
Right,
Yeah.
but have we been getting, since we asked at the last
We
meeting?
got one yesterday.
I didn't read any of them until yesterday. 'Cause
And
they
all of
came
that's in the
in,
backup?
She mentioned that we've added one, and I was like, oh, and so I found them.
Okay,
But they're also in the online agenda packet for today's meeting.
I think it would be helpful if, and I think this is what the way it was done at the last committee, was that as they came in, they were all forwarded to us. So I didn't even realize
we
we were
would do
I was
that.
wondering why we weren't getting
Yeah,
any.
I guess,
Um,
I guess I'm just cautious because we were so optimistic that we would get public input as the
Hard to
P and Z
get.
considered, building height and setback requirements here in the past 3 or 4 months, and nobody came. And then we had our joint public meeting here with P and Z and City Council, and almost no one came to that as well. But we have gotten probably close to 50 altogether emails from people that are just kind of dropping out of the sky.
You get it both ways.
Yeah.
And just like all of us, when I take my walk in Rollingwood, I get stopped, and, which is why I don't walk in Rosewood. But
Get a bicycle.
that's why we both take our walks on the lake.
It's cause and effect. When one of these bodies goes to try to do something and they post a message on a WhatsApp group, then all of a sudden everyone's talking about it, and then you get activity, you get the emails.
Yeah.
But I think if we don't have any action here and we post for the town hall, we might have nobody show up.
And we may not, but I, you know, when we do that, I will do the utmost to at least notify everybody a lot of different ways, through the city, through, I did contact Impact and Susan Davis, and so I can get some, out of the Statesman and on the Impact. And if necessary, tape a notice on each mailbox in Rollingwood.
But I think part of it, can we ask, like, can we target it? Because I think if people are ready to respond to something, they will bring that, right? If I ask open-ended, do you have any feedback? It's crickets.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's exactly, and, you know, I had said, height, setbacks,
Okay,
and then the FAR, which we'll have to explain, impervious cover, other solutions we might have, that try to get their impact. And I think that covers most of what we're gonna be, looking at when it comes down to it.
I have a database of, I don't know, 60% of the neighborhood, so I haven't done it yet, but I can send out a message on that list, and I would
And I'll
suspect
have
we could
just
get more,
treats,
it would get more,
cookies.
but I just didn't know.
I think you should make it so that people don't necessarily have to come to the town hall, cause that's,
No, it can be on the,
Yeah.
Zoom.
well, and even
Or just
that might be
email, yeah.
hard. Like, I think when people have time at the end of the day and they can sit down and focus on this after they've focused on everything else, I think they should have the option of composing a new email or filling out a survey or something that makes
Well,
it
I
convenient.
think the survey is an integral part of what we should
Mhm.
be doing. I think that was very effective. I got a lot of impact out of the
Mhm.
one that was done, for the commercial team.
Mhm.
That meant a lot to me.
I think it could be helpful to explain the process and the timeline. So I don't know that I even know and fully understand what we intend to do, but I think we're thinking of forming up some different proposals and then surveying the public again at that point in time, right? And then that's what'll. So this is kind of shaping that, or am I not correct?
Well,
with that?
I had only planned on one survey, but that's not my forte, to be very honest.
Well, I think what we did last time was really good, which was we got a lot of email input and citizen input. That informed the survey.
Yeah.
We sent out the survey. From the survey, we put together a proposal, and then we had multiple town halls to get input on the proposal. I think that makes sense, because if it's too early, you're right. I think that you get reactions to whatever you just proposed rather than, hey, I really wanted you to listen to what I had in mind, rather than telling me, making me react to something.
Again, I know I mentioned this last time, but if we're gonna have a public hearing, I'm gonna call 10 or 15 people and say, hey, come.
Yeah.
And I think if we all did that and made that effort, that would create a little bit of synergy. I know Alex
Mhm.
mentioned that earlier, that,
Well, there's nothing like setting off a fire alarm to get people to come out, like with the milk and cookies. All of a sudden, everybody was on.
well, I think if you throw impervious coverage in there, that'll get.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Absolutely, well.
Building height and
I don't
impervious
mind
cover
putting
will
that out there
definitely.
For that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually my concern is that we've been talking about building height for a while, and I can't seem to get arrested on this thing. Everybody kind of has an opinion, but not a strong one, or concerned enough to show up.
Well, the truth of the matter, Dave, none of us can look at a building, and it takes and I do this a lot, but it's difficult for me, like the building next to me. I looked at it and went, that's probably 35 feet. Turns out it was a little bit over that,
Sure.
but that's what it was. So it's actually 45, but that's another matter, but that's the difference. Okay.
I have to leave.
All right.
So-
Well, let's, do we want to do item number 5? I didn't hear anything on, that we wanna have as third parties come in right now, but as we go through this, anybody that wants to bring that up, I will make sure that we get whoever we need.
I would like, I think it would be good if we had a presentation from staff on, even if it's just, here are the things that are really hard to deal with, and here are the things that most people are complaining about during the process.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful, and it doesn't have to be long, but
I
just,
think that sounds like a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah. So we would have, I would suggest we both get, Nikki and our, the building inspector to do that. If, Nikki, would you mind getting with them and try to do that?
If I may, I will probably be consulting, sorry, with Kay Freese. So
Yeah.
Kay Freese, they have a planner who does all of our zoning reviews. So she is the one that looks at the building height, makes sure that it's all okay. She's the
Yeah.
one that does all of that. So that's the one I'm going to be consulting mostly with. So I don't necessarily think that the building official for actual building inspections would be beneficial at this moment.
Okay.
My recommendation would be we allow staff to figure out who the best person to
Yeah.
communicate to us on what the issues are.
So you just want
that-
some information.
Yeah, I don't
I'll
want
get
to tell
you
you, I don't want to
information.
tell you the information you have to give us. I just want you to, I think we need feedback from you guys.
Okay.
Because you know more than we do. Well, not more than Dave maybe, but
No,
the rest
no,
of us,
no,
yes.
You're
Me,
too
yes.
flattering quick.
We see a different side of it,
Yeah.
so for sure.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that would be item number 4 here we're still talking
That's
about,
correct.
right?
Well,
And would that be something that we would request these presentations here in this?
mhm,
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
all right, good.
So that said, I'm hearing that we probably should table number 5 until,
Yeah, I don't know that I might table the open house, but I still feel like we need more feedback. And I feel like we still
too.
need to give people something to respond to that's
okay,
kind of next level, but I don't know what that is.
I think we need to ask the public about these, you know, the bullet points on
Mhm.
the ordinances, and again, I think I can reach a lot of people, but I certainly can't reach all of them. I do think that the app, the gentleman's group app reached a lot of people.
There's also a women's.
Yeah, I think if we hit the gentleman's group, the women's group, and any private list that anybody has, that would be helpful. I know Councilmember Hunley has probably a pretty extensive list.
Mhm.
Might be able to lean on her to send out a message
Yeah.
asking for feedback.
okay. That would be, let's just say that that's item number 6 that we're working on. As a, so we would, or, excuse me, item number 5. So we wanna try to get some input before we set a date
I think so.
on that. And I'm okay with that, cause I think that's appropriate.
What is the best way to go about, you know, listing the things that we wanna ask and how we ask?
Well, we have a list from the city, the city council.
I think it's vague though, you know, I don't know. But
What, this list that's
this
here?
list, am I still, do I have an updated one?
You mean this comprehensive residential code?
Mhm.
Okay, this is a collection of things that I had been hearing about,
So
and
that's a
that some had been
different
provided by different city council members, notes that I had taken during P&Z meetings, things like that.
Where is that?
That is,
I got that last.
issues
this?
identified by city
Okay.
council members, P&Z, and city
Oh,
staff.
I thought that came from the city. I didn't realize that came from you.
I
Yeah.
thought it
Well,
came from the
they,
city.
well,
Oh, okay, then I
well,
have
it did.
Yeah, yeah.
You have it.
You know,
That's from last
They
meeting.
included
here's-
it in our charge.
Well, here's the thing, is that the history of this is that I co-wrote this and presented it to P and Z.
Oh,
P
got
and
it.
Z approved it.
And then council
Then it
did.
went to council, and then
Got it.
council approved it. No changes were made. So this is effectively the first draft,
Got it.
okay? And that's why I asked whether or not we should be adding things to it, and what's the process for doing that, which is fine. And nonetheless, it never really intended to be exhaustive. It was just what was before us at the moment,
Yeah.
okay?
And I think what we wanna do is consolidate, like, I think maybe ask 5 questions, or, just throwing out a number.
Well, could
And
I
then-
ask that we have a volunteer to do that, and we'll give it to the city, and the city can just give it
Can
to all
we
each of us.
email back and forth? Is that a violation of?
Everything should go,
Well, I mean, as we compile a list, yeah, I know, I watched the video. I did.
I was just gonna give you the code.
I could send it to Dave, and Dave could send it to, no.
No, just send it in to the city, and she can send it out to each of us, and we just, it's easier.
But we can't conduct business that way. We
No.
can't have a discussion
No.
through email, through staff.
No,
So
Yeah.
I would recommend that somebody, 1 to 2 people volunteer to put together
You can
a.
have a subcommittee that emails back and forth. You can have 2 people having a conversation
Yes,
about
absolutely.
how
Two people
do you
you
edit
can,
this
but you
list.
can't
Yes,
have-
that's right.
Okay,
We
Yeah.
can't have a quorum.
that's right. Well, that's what I meant. Like, can we just have a pair of people
So-
editing a list?
Yes.
Okay.
so Alex, you're obviously one of them, volunteer. So.
I'm happy to help with that.
And,
Great.
good, good,
Okay.
Perfect.
great. All right, so we have.
Let me understand what just happened here, because I'm a little lost. What are we going to do?
So there was a motion
Okay.
to.
Or at least a recommendation.
There was a motion to
Okay.
appoint Alex and Jeff as to put together a shorter request for feedback that would be circulated
We're gonna
among
basically-
the various
yeah.
community organizations.
Take this, edit it into a way that is concise and easy to respond to for the public, and then present it back for discussion.
At the next
So that
meeting.
we just tidy this up, and then we can all talk about it before we give it to the public. Is that?
So what we wanted is a motion for that, to set that subcommittee.
Sounds like you just made one.
I,
We do have a motion,
I,
and,
yes.
I
I
second.
s-
Okay.
I second that motion, yeah.
okay,
Okay.
and all those in favor?
Aye.
We're
Yeah.
good.
Lovely.
All right, I'm sorry about our time, it's getting close here. We do have to set a future date, and, Ryan, we can set it anytime we wanna set it. I'm convinced, after reading that more carefully, I'm convinced that there was a suggestion from the city, council rather than a requirement. So we can set our committee, times whenever is the most convenient for everybody here that needs to have it.
I think what might make sense is if you work with city staff, because they're gonna know what windows are even available, and maybe make a proposal of
We
dates
have
for the next
some,
one.
but I will make sure those are sent out, and we will set up a next meeting on that. I would like to do them on a regular basis so that our citizens would be, have an opportunity to do it on that. I'd like to do it twice a month, just to get this wrapped up, but, we don't have to do it at 4 o'clock. We can do it at, a more convenient time for everybody that has, younger children.
I think that's great.
Just can't be too late for those of us that have to, the 60 is or the.
70 is the new 50?
Yeah, except for now, the 10 o'clock is the new 12 o'clock or something like that. I get it wrong all the time, but
For what it's worth, right now, 4 o'clock is as good as any time for me, so.
we'll, if somebody has some times that they would prefer, if they'll send it in, then we'll go, I'll try to make it work from that standpoint.
Yeah, Ryan, just pick the time.
And-
I'm allowed to communicate with one person on, so I'll communicate with you on,
Right.
my suggestions for time.
Excellent.
On future agenda items, I thought it was gonna get on here, and I apologize, I never made a stink about it, but I do think, and I was prepared to do it, but then I realized it wasn't on the agenda, that a discussion of the feedback that we got from residential the last time we had, the strike force got some feedback from residential, and,
Right.
I'd like to at least walk through it.
I'll make sure
It's,
that's
it's
on
not,
the
it's
agenda.
not extensive,
No,
but I'd
no,
like to.
No, Jeff has done some,
Yeah,
you
those
did
were
some
helpful.
extraction of, based on,
Yep.
I haven't read through it all, but I know you did some work there, right? You wanna talk about that?
We can't, it's not on the
It's not on the
agenda.
agenda.
So,
Sorry,
um,
okay, sorry,
But
okay.
we'd like to add it to the agenda
Yeah,
next
for
time.
next
Well, there is
Towards
too,
them.
in addition to the letters that we had gotten, or emails that we had gotten, at the rear of all that is a spreadsheet that kind of encapsulates all the things. Have you had a chance to look at that? And it's got a little bit of a,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, we're kind of on our way to understanding.
That was my point earlier, is I
Yeah.
would like the town hall to be targeted, to be something incremental beyond what we already have.
Yeah,
So,
I think
We're
we're,
on our
I think
way.
we're on our way, but I think there's
Alright.
probably another round
Okay.
of like getting more community emails before we can.
okay.
yep.
I'm good. Okay, with all that, I just wanted to say one thing, and that is I have a motto, and that is that the key to good mental health is low expectations. So if you want to maintain your mental health, just keep that in mind, what's going to come back for us, okay? So,
Did we skip number 6?
Probably.
Yeah, so Ryan brought it up earlier, the IBC, like, I don't wanna go on this big expedition to find all these documents if city staff has them. I think it'd be really helpful if we have a shared drive somewhere where we can all collect the information, we can all access it, and we can all review it.
and Desiree is doing that,
Okay.
isn't that right?
We're working on a Dropbox that we
Yes.
we have more
Yeah, so it would just be a Dropbox folder that we would share the link with everybody. We just want to confirm still currently that it's going to be, TOMA compliant, so people won't be able to, discuss back and forth or anything.
Yeah.
And we may need to make that available to the public as well, but just trying to figure out the details of that. But we'll have a Dropbox set up in the next week. Also, back on the communication, we're going to set up a kind of a central email address that people can email crcrc@rollingwithtx.gov, and it would send out those
That'd be
emails to
helpful.
you guys.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah,
and then
that's
if we get
lovely.
any personally that don't go through there, we can send it just to that email and it will disperse.
Yeah, that'd
as
be
it needs
great,
to.
and with the Dropbox, if city staff can have access to it and we can just request documents and they'll get dropped there.
I think that's the best way to do it, and
Yeah.
we could just make it viewable or,
read
accessible.
only.
You can download stuff, but that way, the whole public could have access to it. We could say, here's everything they're looking at, take a peek.
The
Perfect.
last time we did this, there was a page on the city's website, that briefly talked about what was happening and did have links to documents.
Yes.
I was
Super
wondering
helpful.
if we could do something similar for
Absolutely.
this.
Yes, I think we have one
Right.
started. We just may not have it linked to our meeting page yet, but that's in the works.
Okay,
for sure.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I have just one more thing? I got this Building Heights presentation here. Is this a useful bomb to just kind of insert into some communication to somewhere so that people look at it and say, that's horrible, or, holy cow, let's look at what they're doing, Or is it something we just put it away and
I,
hope that,
I thought this was great. I think that's for me, that's the purpose of the subcommittees.
Yeah.
Like this is too many topics to cover to go into the level of detail. I'd
Right.
love to go into that on a separate conversation. But
okay.
yeah, I thought it was very well done.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I-
no,
and
it's
I
not
think-
about that, it's just
You've done a
about
great job.
putting some use to it.
Yeah.
I think
Putting some
that's
use
the
to it.
kind of thing that we could share with the public. I mean, you weren't saying like, here's the answer, you were just saying, here's a whole bunch of information
thoughts.
that to begin. And so I think that would be the kind of thing that could go on the website of, initial research on building heights.
That's, I guess, what I'm asking. Can it be made available so that it gets a starting point for conversation?
I think that would be the kind of thing that hopefully we could put on the website.
And it's also, so it's in the meeting packets, so we can post on the website, for past meeting packets, click here, this one, they talked about this, this, and this, they can click on it and go see, the attachments and the videos and all of that.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.